Welcome to the 25th Hour podcast, where successful business owners talk about the one resource that we can't get back, our time, and explore ways on how to create that magical 25th hour. I'm your host, Lisa Crilly-Malice, and owner of Impactive Strategies. We've all been there, in the zone, everything's working, everything's going great, and then all of a sudden, everything's not going great, and we start dropping balls, and things start falling through the cracks, and we get it. Totally get it. It's what happens. Your time management strategies got you this far, and then your business grew, your life got busier, and it got a little tricky along the way. So we're going to talk about ways to up-level those skills and to help you get control of your day again and make that 25th hour a reality. Today, I'm super excited for my guest. It is Jennifer Hottle. She's a profit strategist who helps successful entrepreneurs create positive cash flow, increase profit, and solve money-related challenges. Her focus is on helping you change your relationship with your cash. How awesome is that? And I am so excited that Jennifer's here because I know Jennifer and I love Jennifer, and I'm thrilled that she's a guest on the podcast. So thank you for sharing our time with us today, Jennifer. I'm so glad you're here.
Oh, thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
All right. So we're going to jump right in. And I want to know, when was a time that you really felt in the zone, when you were totally in control of your time?
Oh my. I think that would be, was it last year? So I've worked with a business coach probably in the last 3 years. And last year she helped me put together what she called our CEO schedule. And I was never good at blocking time. It was one of those, like I had it in my head, but you start off your day with what you think you're going to do. And that usually falls apart by, the first thing on your list. So, and she had heard me kind of talk about it over and over. And so last year she said, okay, what do you want to accomplish? I said, this is what I want to do. And she said, great. And we sat down and literally said, okay, what time do you want to start? When do you want to be done? And let's block out time so that for the whole week, I can actually see. I had literally in front of my computer, huge paper on my wall showing me what my schedule was. And, but it was like a template. And so what I ended up doing is I looked at it and I'm like, you know what? And then I looked at my calendar on my phone and I'm like, okay, well, I'm not gonna be able to do that and that. So I actually sat down and I think it was for 9 weeks, it was for an entire summer. And I pulled up every single day and I recreated that exact same template on my poster boards, looking at my calendar. So every single day I'm like, okay, I know already, my kids are doing this and someone's got to do this. And so I kind of rearranged it. And I mean, I won't lie. I mean, I didn't stick to it to a T, but it was really good to be able to see at a glance, okay, I have blocked out this amount of time to do this. And that was really, really helpful.
I love time blocking. That is absolute. I love it. And as you're saying this, over on my wall is very similar to what you're describing. And I use it in terms of like Mondays are set for this. Like I don't see clients on Mondays or Fridays. I only see clients on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, because I need to be in a certain mindset for that. Mm-hmm. And then Mondays and Fridays are something else, but absolutely I do. I'm right there with you. What do you think was the toughest thing? Like you said, I didn't follow it all the time, which is perfectly fine. What do you think was the toughest thing about following it?
I didn't, so I had the schedule and I could see it, but what I didn't do and what made it hard was that I didn't adjust how I was working. So I automatically, when I come into my office, my email is open, my phone is on. So, I can see texts and, and then it'd be one of those, oh, I have to do this. And so I may have blocked 2 hours to do one thing, but, oh, this email comes, I have to respond to that. Or, oh, hey, look, I haven't checked Facebook. It was one of those, I sort of self-sabotaged it because I created this really beautiful schedule and it, certainly was nothing wrong with it in of itself, but I didn't make any true adjustments to allow me to actually do it well.
Oh, so you had the structure.
Yeah.
But it didn't exactly take into account your behavior.
Right. Yeah. Well, I didn't. Yeah.
Right. Well, and so it's so funny. You know how something will remind you of something else, and you're like, okay, this is obviously a lesson that I'm meant to have. So the conversation we're having right now, I had a very similar one with a client this morning. And we laid out, he's studying for his real estate exam. And he has had this beautiful plan for 8 weeks of what he's going to accomplish. And we're now 4 weeks in. And he's got one section done and 18 to go. And what we realized was very similar to what you're saying, in that it was beautiful, but it didn't take into account checking email, doing things like that. And so we actually built in a couple pieces into his schedule around, okay, look, we know if you're doing this Monday morning, you're going to be obsessing about your email that came in over the weekend. So what are we going to do about that? And the same thing on Friday, he's doing it Friday afternoon. And he's like, okay, if I start my email before I start to study on Friday afternoon, I'm never going to study. And so it was factoring that stuff in. And I think that's one of the challenges when we build structure, is remembering to build structure around ourselves and our own brains. Because if it's hard, we're not going to follow it. We would need to make it easy.
Well, it's something I discovered about myself. I always thought of it as, I don't know if a weakness, right? So when I ask you, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? So for me, and this was, kind of when I was thinking about this, it kind of goes back even when I was like in school, is it turns out I work really well under pressure. I don't enjoy it at all. Nobody does. But if I know that, and you're very familiar with Parkinson's law, right? Because we all learned it from Profit First. But so, if you have X amount of time, you will take X amount of time, right? So if you have a week to do something, you'll take a week. If you only have 2 hours to do the same thing, somehow miraculously, you will get it done in the 2 hours. And for me, I have found out that I work best. I produce best, and I can stay very focused if it's one of those like, okay, I got to get, my lesson plan in and my class is starting. I have to finish it by now, even though, I may know, I know weeks ahead of time, but it's just one of those, like, it's not that I always thought it meant that I was, lazy. And I was just one of those, like, I'm just a chronic procrastinator. And, but that is, as it turns out, something I always thought that I had to change. And what I think, part of why I think the whole CEO thing for me wasn't as successful. Again, the structure was awesome. It was just that I didn't build in really, this is really how I work well. Again, not that I work well, like, again, I don't always particularly enjoy it, but it's also how I'm the most focused. I get the most done, is just in that kind of environment.
Right. So it's, I love how you said it's how I produce best, not necessarily how I work best, but how I produce best. And at the end of the day, it's not about, like I joke, it's not about butts and seats. Like, I'm going to sit at my desk and I'm going to work from 9 to 5. It's about what your outcome is at the end. And so being able to play off your strengths so that you produce best is the key. So tell me more about Profit First and how that may tie in with the Parkinson's law piece.
So then that's the first time I ever heard it, at least in that term. I mean, I think when I learned it, what it is, I knew what it was, but what it is in short is that you will do what you need to do with the resources you have available. So the way it ties in with Profit First in terms of managing your cash is you will find a way to be, it kind of forces you to be really creative when you have to delegate your money in such a way that it is fulfilling the necessities of your business. You're paying yourself. You are paying your, setting money aside for you, pay yourself, pay your taxes, to give yourself a profit distribution, and then making sure that your business obviously can function, right? And usually the biggest pushback that people will tell me is that, oh, I can't possibly, I can't reduce the amount, to run my business. And I said, well, let's think about that. And so when we start kind of playing around and say, okay, well, if you are able to move your money from here, from your operating to here, I'll bet you can start paying yourself. What would that do for you? And so slowly but surely, as you start reducing those resources, and I'm not saying like, get down to the absolute bare minimum, although unfortunately in the times we live in, that might be the case, but really and truly, it's just a matter of really unleashing that creativity and thinking outside the box. And I think for me, profit first, amongst just getting your cash in order has probably been the biggest thing, is that it's allowed me to really stretch what, outside of what I think, things should be, and thinking, oh, okay, well, if we can't do it this way, let's figure out, we know what the outcome needs to be. Well, how else can we get there? And that's just kind of freed that creativity part of my brain.
Yeah. Well, and I love how there's such a great tie-in between how you choose to invest your time and how you choose to invest your money.
Sure.
Like all the time we'll say, time is one thing that you can't get back and you can always make more money. That is true in an extent, but once your money is spent, it's spent. Just like once your time is spent, it's spent. So there's definitely a correlation there. And I remember reading about Parkinson's law when I read Profit First, because it's one of my favorite books. And I had forgotten about that until you brought it back up again. So thank you for that. Tell me more about what it feels like to be in the zone when you're working.
It's funny because I don't always know I'm in the zone until I'm done. Or something pulls me out of it. And I was like, oh man, like I don't pull all-nighters anymore. I'm not in my 20s, where, I'm cramming for exams and it's, finals week and I haven't slept in, 2 weeks, where I could do that. But every once in a while, because I'll be working on something and I'm like, you know what? I'm in it now. I want to keep going. And it's funny, you think I'd be exhausted at the end, but there's that sense of accomplishment. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's going to catch up with me later, but when I'm done, maybe I finish at 3 a.m, which is highly unusual for me, but maybe I do. But I'm like, you know what? Then it's done. And I can start with something new the next day. And I'm not trying to do the same task over 5 days because I'm only doing it for 20 minutes here and 5 minutes there. And I'm like, you know what? And that works for some people to break it up like that. But for me, it's one of those, like, especially when things that maybe I don't always fully enjoy, but once I get going and you kind of get into that rhythm, that it's gratifying. It's so funny. People will laugh at me. There is something gratifying when you're reconciling bank statements that most people don't enjoy doing. But once you get it going, you're like, all right, that was pretty cool. What's next? And again, it's one of those, like, okay, now, because that's the question, that what's next? And I'm actually a little excited because I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, okay, I can do that. And I can move on to the next thing.
What are some things that you find are easiest to get in the zone on?
Oh, well, I guess it depends on when you mean, like, for work wise, probably when I'm doing administrative things that most people put off administrative things, that I'll if I start getting started with those, again, like bank statements and putting financials together, right, and doing some analysis, that to me is fun. You know, now there are some things that that like I'll start when I start creating things. Like for example, I was putting a workshop together and I was creating a workbook for it. And it's one of those like getting started. If I could fast forward to like 20 minutes later, one of those things where I'm already in the zone here's the thing. And you say, well, you know, what's it like being in the zone? Being in the zone is awesome. It's getting there. The getting to it, man, that's probably, I do not enjoy that part whatsoever. Getting that momentum, getting that start, right? Once you're there and it's great and you can keep going. And sometimes somebody has to just tell you to stop. You know, usually it's my son's like, can we have, you know, mommy Peter time now? I'm like, okay, mama's worked long enough, I guess. You know, but but I think for me, the hardest part is just getting into that part, right? So, but once I get started, you know, again, creating my workbook, I was like, okay, you know, how am I going to get, and once I got it outlined and I was like, now I'm creating it and I'm in Canva and I'm putting all my stuff together. I'm like, oh, this is kind of fun.
When I work with clients, often I have clients who are the reverse of you, meaning they love to get started and they love the end, but they hate what they call the messy middle.
Oh.
And so they'll start 20 things and then they'll fall by the wayside because they don't love the doing. Mm-hmm. And so you sound like you love the getting, you know, digging in, it seems silly to say getting dirty, but like digging in and really doing that middle part is getting it started. So what have you found to be successful to help you activate, to get moving? Because you've experienced what it's like to be in that phase. So what are some tricks you have about how to get started?
Well, the pressure of the deadline. It's probably the biggest motivator. I told you, I said, it's one of those, like, until I actually feel compelled, you know, again, it's not that I don't care about the work I'm doing or don't want to produce something of really good quality. But for me, that's the motivation for me to get going. Once I get kind of sparked and do that, you know, I can, can keep going. Probably the best example, and it's not a work related example necessarily, although it gets me going, is folding and putting away laundry. Holy smoke. I mean, if left to my devices, my family would probably live out of all of our laundry baskets all the time, right? Which is chaotic. There's 5 of us. I mean, there's just no way. After a while, you're like, okay, you know, I know that we've got, you know, I'm wearing the same pair of pants, you know, for a week now. What's going on? So but it's like everywhere. Like, where do you even start? When things are chaos in front of you, where do you start? And honestly, when I get going, it's one of those, okay, I'm just going to start here. At some point, this is going to start looking better, right? So I just start with the big pile that's right next to my bed, pick it up, throw it on the bed, just start folding. When I can start to see that, you know, the clothing is folded and organized and oh, hey, yes, my children do actually own socks. And here they are. You know, and that gets me, okay, now I can move on to the next pile and the next pile. And when I can start seeing not only is it organized, but that, hey, I have a floor. That's really nice. Cool. Now I can vacuum it. And then it gets me going like, okay, now I can do this and now I can do this. But it's one of those, like, I can't move on to some of the other things I'd like to do until this is done.
Right.
And so I don't know if does that make sense?
Absolutely. It's that little bit of progress. If you can just say, I'm going to take a tiny bit of progress, it feeds on the next and it feeds on the next. And I love that you use the laundry example. I just folded laundry yesterday. And so it's just the 2 of us here right now. And so I had my husband's clothes on his side of the bed and my clothes on my side of the bed. And I looked and I was like, how can this man have 11 shirts and 2 pair of pants? I do not understand, like, how is this even possible? And, you know, and I look at mine and of course I have the same number of shirts as, you know, tops as bottoms. And he has 11 shirts. I'm not even making up the number 11, like, because I was looking at it. And so then I went over and I counted and I was like, 11 shirts, 2 pair of pants. How does that happen? but anyway, but it's about that idea of progress. And so what you're doing is you're digging into your strengths. You know your strength is deadline driven. And so once you get to that place, that is an activator for you, so that you can start. And it may be hard, but you've gotten to the place where you've gotten to the place you can't put it off anymore. Like you said, same pair of pants for a week, oddly enough, and no socks for the kids. And so then you're like, okay, we've hit that place. And then, if you can see a tiny bit of progress, it gets you moving and it gets you going. Now, one of the reasons I ask about like being in the zone and feeling in control of your schedule, like your CEO schedule or the laundry or whatever the piece may be, is when you're in the zone, you're so much more productive. Like, because you can hone in that focus, which when you have more in the zone moments, really what you're doing is you're saving time, because you're so focused, you're so in there. And so what I wonder is, when you can create more in the zone moments and you could create an extra hour in your day, so like say the 25th hour, what would you do with it?
Well, what would I do with it? It would be one of two things. It's going to be, I've developed, and I think most people have during our COVID days now, is baking. I mean, I always loved to bake. But now I'm like really into not just baking, but I'm looking to like perfect. I'm going to perfect making a bagel. I swear I am. And it's just one of the, something like that. The other would be probably to hang out and play with my kids.
Okay. Yeah. And, it's interesting when we think about that extra 25th hour is every time you're in the zone, you're creating that for yourself. But if we go back to Parkinson's law, without thinking about I've created an extra 20 minutes or I've created an extra hour, it's so easy to fill it in with other stuff.
Oh, sure.
Right? And so now you've identified, I'd like to play with my kids and or perfect a bagel or other baking options. Tell me more about the bagel experience.
So it's funny because so I started watching. I probably spend more time on Facebook than I probably should. Who doesn't? Just you see one thing, you keep scrolling. Well, I happened upon. So I'm a big Alias fan. I love Jennifer Gardner. I like so many of her movies. Well, she has a Facebook videos that she does, her pretend baking show, and I just started watching it just for fun. And I'm like, well, these recipes don't seem too difficult. And I started making them. And one day she was making bagels and I'm like, I got to try that. And that's when I started. And then it was one of those, my very first batch came out more like pretzels in terms of taste. So I'm like, all right, let me try this again. And I tried another recipe and it's one of those, like, I'm getting closer. I'm getting closer.
My father-in-law did that with baklava cheesecake.
Ooh.
I know. So he made baklava from scratch and he made cheesecake from scratch. And then he was putting them together. And
I've never heard of that. That's amazing. Right?
Yes. And he would have us taste it. He would taste it and he would not like it. And then he would have us taste it. And we're like, this is the best thing we've ever had. And he's like, it's no good. I'm going to throw it out. And we would all take turns saying, oh, we'll throw it out for you. Wink, wink. And we would take it home. It was amazing. The early stages were amazing. By the time he perfected it, unbelievable.
Well, it's fun. There's something about one thing I love with baking, and I find this, you can tie it back if you tie it back even to your business, is it's fun to start you start off with just raw ingredients, individual ingredients, right? You got some herbs, you got some spices, you may have some baking, whatever, flour, and you just start putting it in piece by piece, and somehow you end up with this like finished product. And I'm like, there's a huge sense of like, I just made bagels. Right? I go to, Einstein Bagels all the time. And here I am, I'm at home. I made my own bagels, gosh darn it. And my kids are actually eating it, which was amazing. So it's just there's a huge sense of accomplishment. And it's, again, one of those like, what can I do next? And then well, you know what? I need to go down in my office and tackle something. And it's just one of those, like, it's an energy.
It's a momentum builder.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. Say, you're the wordsmith. There you go.
Well, but if you see the theme with the laundry, see a little bit of progress and move. With the bagel, get something that the kids like and eat that can move me into something else. And so as you activate to get yourself into the zone, you're just building momentum. You're finding something you can win so that you can build momentum to move into something else.
Oh, I like it. A momentum builder. I got to remember that one. Good one.
Yes. Now, do you see, when your clients are implementing Profit First, do you see anything similar with building momentum?
I do. It's funny, again, because so one of the things as I was trained years ago to become certified. And of course, it's beyond, you get the basis when you read the book, but when you go through the training with Mike, and he goes really in depth, and you have to put it in, one of the requirements, you got to put it in your own business so that you can pass on that experience, to your clients. And so, of course, when you're particularly with Profit First, the beginnings of it are hard. I would say, I always caution my clients now, the first 3 months, it's going to be hard. You're making these changes, but they're going to be small changes. And in the beginning, because the changes that they're making, maybe it's just reducing it a little bit or moving it a little bit here, you're layering it on, you're not seeing it. But usually right around month 4, and that's usually because that's their very first profit distribution. That is usually if they're paying quarterly taxes. Holy moly, by the way, I've got money in my account and I didn't have that before. And so, or maybe I didn't have all of it, right? So it's just one of those, oh, okay, this does work. And as you said, that's the momentum builder. Now, obviously, it's, it takes longer than folding baskets of laundry sometimes for me. But yeah, but as a coach, that's the part where, okay, yes, we meet regularly, and okay, what's frustrating you? All right, well, let's take a look. Because sometimes you need somebody else to point out you have made progress. It doesn't seem like it, but look, you actually, you were able to reduce your overhead by 5%. That may not seem like a lot, all right, but here's what would happen if you keep going over time. And, you just kind of keep them going. Okay, well, that's not working. Okay, what can we do to shift it? And so that they don't give up on it. So again, it's hard to see it when you're in it, as you know, and having somebody who's been there, who knows has all these different tools in their toolbox that they know, okay, let's bring this in and see if this will work for you.
And I think that's one of the great things about the work that you do, is that you can show, here's the progress you've made, so qualitative. Like, here it is. Here are the numbers. And then you can say, and not only that, but if you can just keep the focus and just stay on the plan and the path, here's what it's going to look like in a couple of months. And here's what it's going to look like in a couple of months from there. And what are you going to do with your profit distribution? What are you going to do with when you can all of a sudden start to name it? This becomes a bagel machine or whatever, or this becomes someone to do my laundry, or, this becomes something that I want to roll back into the business, or whatever. And you can name it. That's what I love. I love the work that you do and how you help clients take control of their money. Like, I always laugh because there's such a similarity in the work that we do. I help them take control of their time. You help them take control of their money. But all of that makes them stronger business owners.
Yeah.
And able to serve more people. Oh, awesome. 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 All right. So how can people find you?
Oh, how do they want to find? Well, if they would like to find me.
Yes. Tell me, how can they find you? Tell us, how can they get a hold of you?
Well, the best way is through my website. So if you go to j2hconsulting.com, you can find, there's a link there if you want to schedule I offer a 30-minute complimentary call, and we can kind of talk through what you're struggling with and see, if the solutions I have to offer are a good fit for you. If not, if I can steer you to the right one, I'm happy to do that too. I've also got some on my website as well. There's some free tools to help you get started. If you're not quite ready to bring somebody in, but you'd like to get an idea of where you're at, that complements the book, there's some information there as well. You can also find me on Facebook and LinkedIn.
What are some of the challenges people would be facing that they would know is like, ooh, yeah, it would be a good idea for me to reach out to Jennifer?
So, it's timely with what's happening right now with COVID. So as most business owners know, there was, or it still is, a lot of financial assistance. Particularly, there's the payroll protection plan. There has been the EIDL, the economic injury disaster loan fund through the SBA, along with other grants and things. And one thing I will say is, because I went through those as well, so I understand how that whole thing works, is that one of the most important things that in order to obtain those funding is, especially if you are a solopreneur or you are a small business owner with only a few employees, as an owner, you are an employee. And if you are not paying yourself regularly, which unfortunately, that's probably the most common struggle that I hear, and people come see me and don't always see the importance of that. Timing of it now, if you weren't paying yourself regularly before, it probably knocked you out from being able to participate in some of these programs, right? Because how would you prove you had any kind of, economic disaster because of COVID, if you weren't already paying yourself? And so that would probably be the strongest indication right now, aside from, obviously, there was who could have prepared that, businesses and towns and the country would shut down for, 2+ months. And so many businesses were affected. So much more important is the profit first system now is, did you have an emergency, did you build up a vault fund for such an emergency, right? So that, even if you have the additional funding and grants, could you have done this on your own? And I think those, if nothing else, the timing of what's happening now probably amplified what people already knew about their businesses, but it's one of those like, I'm still getting by, nothing bad is really happening, or, if things do, then, we're just used to kind of getting to the paycheck to paycheck. Well, all of a sudden, there isn't any. And literally, everything came to a crashing halt, and probably hardly anybody was prepared for that. So I think now is probably an excellent time. We're all rebuilding. So take a hard look, understand the importance of paying yourself, of having those emergency funds, really, and taking a hard look at those operating expenses, right? Do you have to scale everything back to its core? And learn and figure out how you're going to rebuild, and rebuild a business that can sustain, who knows if, what is laying down the road. If we ever have to do this again, God forbid, so that's what I would say.
Oh, thank you. That's so clear. It's like, if you were in a place where you went to apply for a PPP or an EIDL loan and couldn't because you weren't paying yourself, you need to talk to Jennifer so she can help you figure out how to do that. Mm-hmm. If you're in a place where if you had savings or little savings has been wiped out, or like you call it the vault, this is a perfect opportunity to talk to Jennifer to help you. You want to have a solid financial base, and she can help you figure that out. So the best way that you can do that, go to j2hconsulting.com and just set up a time to meet with her. So I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. And if you want to create the 25th hour in your day so that you can perfect the art of making bagels or play more with your kids or whatever it is that you would like to do in that extra magical 25th hour, go ahead and go to impactivestrategies.com/quiz. There's a 2-minute quiz that you can take, which will give you some ideas of some strategies that you can take to start creating that extra hour each day. So thank you, Jennifer, again, for being on the podcast and for gracing us with your presence and for being so much fun and so insightful and honest and open with us.
Oh, thank you. This was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.